forget about is the extreme youth of the people who were doing the Apollo program. These were people who were averaging 25 and 26 years old. And one of the real difficulties that NASA has at the moment is the lack of very young people joining NASA. When I was doing the visiting professorship at MIT, what I really would have liked to have told my students is, wow, we need to hire you right now. Get enthusiastic young people into NASA. What instead, if I was going to tell them the truth, is I would have said, well, NASA has had a hiring freeze for the last 5 years. They haven't hired anybody. And after the hiring freeze was finished, we're downsizing now. And we're actually trying to get rid of people. There are no places to hire.
Well,
so if we want to solve NASA's problem, that's what needs to be solved.
Well, no. No. That's just not factually correct. NASA's average age is the same within a few months of the average age of the American aerospace industry, which, by the way, is not materially different from that in Europe. Okay? And the reason for that is a consequence, not a choice. And it is a consequence of the fact that, as I said in my comments earlier, for 40 years, and as the Columbia accident investigation pointed out, for 30 years at that time, we've lacked a strategic purpose in space. When you are, by and large, contracting an industry rather than expanding its purpose, the aging of the workforce is what you get. So that is, the phenomenon that you observe is completely correct, but cause and effect are inverted. You can't, quote, fix NASA or fix the aerospace industry by decreeing that they shall hire younger people. What you have to do is provide them with a purpose that causes them to say, okay, to accomplish this purpose, I've got to go out and get some new talent. And that is a national policy decision which we have not made, which gets right back to what I said was the fundamental issue. Do you want to have a real space program or not? Okay?
Thank you for the speech. If NASA could decide its objectives with less political interference, do you think that would help, and how would that be possible to achieve?
Well, it wouldn't be, in a mythical world where NASA could decide its own objectives, that world would be very anti-democratic. It would be at variance with how we run the entire rest of our society. It would be an enclave of un-American behavior. It is not how we have chosen to organize our society. Now, different societies make different choices, but that's just not what we've done. I accept the fact that publicly funded efforts, publicly funded entities have publicly decided purposes. What I find odd is that, and I've used this in other speeches in other places, and if you've heard it before, I'm sorry, I'll use it again. Every time we elect a new president, we do not redecide what the purpose of the Navy will be or the purpose of the Air Force. You know, we may decide whether the Navy gets a new aircraft carrier in my administration or not. And if I'm a Republican, you might get a new aircraft carrier. And if I'm a Democrat, now we're going to take that money and redistribute wealth. But we don't redecide the purpose of the Navy. Okay? Only NASA, as a very visible, with by the way, 4% of DOD's budget, only NASA seems to be a repeated victim to the idea that, well, I just got elected president, I'm going to decide what the purpose of the space program is going to be for my term. And it's silly because no useful purpose can be accomplished in one term. So I accept that in a democratic society we will have politically determined goals. I would like them to remain goals long enough so that they could be accomplished, and then successor administrations could say, well, that turned out well or turned out badly, and then if it turns out badly, you make adjustments, and if it turns out well, maybe you keep doing more of the same. But the feedback cycle is longer than one term, in my opinion. This is going to have to be, I think, the last question, so ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you. As citizens and voters, what would you recommend that we do?
Well, as citizens and voters, since 70% of us, round numbers, approve or strongly approve in every poll ever done of NASA and its purposes, we need as citizens and voters to make election issues out of what we think of as our space program. The greatest value of the space program to me is that it embodies what we think of as American virtues. Okay? Boldness, willingness to risk. Not that other societies don't have those virtues, many do. And they like to, some of them like to join with us in those purposes. But when we think of what it is to be Americans, the willingness to risk, the willingness to be bold, the willingness to take on ventures of uncertain outcome, the willingness to lead when it's forced upon us, those are things that we look back in our history and we can be proud of. And the space program embodies those things. It is what we think of as being what we are, I think. And voters and citizens need to make the point. Regrettably, the space program is so arcane in some of its aspects that you know, we lose strategic thought arguing about what the heavy lift rocket ought to be built like. Do you see what I'm saying? People aren't noticing that the Obama administration is deliberately abandoning a U.S. government-led spaceflight program because they got a shell game going where you're arguing about what rocket to build.
But specifically, you're talking about writing letters to newspapers, writing letters
The most
to
effective thing a
politicians?
citizen can do is write a signed letter to their congressman and their senator. Okay, email is not effective, fax is not effective, but an actual written letter that somebody takes the time to personally sign, and bunches of them, not saying all the same thing, not you know, that is the most effective thing. And every congressional staffer will tell you that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time today.